It's interesting. Swimming, a lot of times we get ready to do a basketball or football game. Not much has changed leading up since their last game, a lot of times. So, preparation wise, a lot of the work we do for a football and basketball game, so to speak, is done in the lead up. And wrestling would be the same way. A lot of these athletes aren't going to wrestle matches till they start during their Olympic run. But swimming, they swim prelims in the morning, then they swim finals a lot of times at night or the next day. So the challenge a lot of times is taking information you have and then kind of whittling it down and putting it where you can find it and put it together in a short time frame before those events happen. So prelims actually will, be able to see from the night before, but also referencing maybe what a swimmer did in a different event in the finals the previous night. So there's a lot more work that goes in the day of once we know, okay, this wrestler, or excuse me, this swimmer in prelims swam this time, they're going to be in this lane. So kind of organizing information, it's a much different process than it is for some of the other sports that we do.
What's the big differences for preparing for prelims rather than what Dan and Rowdy have to do, which is touch upon the major storylines? You're kind of doing it live as it happens. The heats are faster, and also you're based out of Stanford as opposed to being on site. Just how do you kind of prepare for that, knowing that's going to be a different feel than what we're going to see in the finals or in prime time?
Yeah, so we'll kind of go through, and I don't know if we'll call every single heat as it goes, but we'll be ready for a lot of them. But in addition to the Americans, certainly we want to document all those stories and a lot of the great known swimmers. There's so many kind of swimmers and their stories that kind of fly under the radar. So trying to find those, and the great thing about the Olympics is, winning an Olympic gold medal is the dream and the ultimate for a lot of these swimmers. But for many, just getting to the Olympics and getting the chance to represent their country is so special. And they know, and we know, that they're only going to have one swim. But just kind of to recognize that moment, no matter how fast it is, just to see if they can maybe achieve a lifetime best in that, ultimate venue that we'll see at an Olympic Games in Paris.
I used to cover Virginia Tech, so when you have like a guy like Ian Ho who represents Hong Kong and it's his second Olympics and he had heart surgery going into Tokyo, when you have like stories like that going into an Olympics and you finally get to call a race where you have that individual that you've prepped for it because he or she has that interesting story, does that excite you a lot that you get to talk about that to an audience?
Yeah, I mean, people ask all the time, "What do you love about your job?" And I love the games and getting to cover them. I like telling stories. I like finding stories and telling things. And hopefully, we look at this, and I look at it a lot, especially doing a lot of what I would call regular season swimming throughout the calendar years, trying to tell people that are watching is, something that they didn't know that day, and learn something new. And it's the same thing much like a beat reporter covering a team, or baseball broadcaster doing the Reds or the Guardians every night, is trying to tell that audience that's with them all the time something they don't know. And we're getting a lot of new viewers for the Olympics that maybe follow these sports 4 years, and they know some of the big names. They know who Katie Ledecky is, and Simone Manuel, and Caleb Dressel in swimming, but maybe trying to tell them some other stories that they don't know.
You're so such a seasoned broadcaster that you've kind of seen it all, right? But for the prelims, it's always kind of that like expect the unexpected, right? You never know when for some reason like a record falls or when someone who's supposed to get to the finals for some reason doesn't make it. How do you prepare for that? Does that come with a lot of reps and experience?
Yeah, I just think you have to be ready, and you can't expect something to happen. I think the goal is to just be ready no matter what transpires. And if you're ready for anything, then when anything happens, you can kind of react in the right way. But I think it's, you look at it with, open eyes and kind of a genuine reaction to, wow, that would be super surprising. If something like that happens, if there's an athlete that's maybe a medal threat that for some reason doesn't make it through the semis, or doesn't make it from the semis to the final, then I think certainly that's eye opening. And wrestling, the same thing. If a wrestler loses early, of course they're hoping that who they lost to makes the final in wrestling. That would give them a chance to come back and wrestle back towards a bronze medal. But yeah, you just are kind of got to be ready for anything. I mean, for me, I remember the first ever Olympics I called in 2012 in London, I did archery, and the United States men in the team competition upset South Korea, which was ranked #1 of the world. And so we were reacting to that. Then that guaranteed themselves at least silver. And then they went on to take on uh, Italy, I believe, in the final. And the last arrow, it came down to the Italian archer needed a 9 to tie and a 10 to win gold, and he had 10 for gold. So you just never know how it's going to play out, but it can come down to, the last possible moment. And that was the first day I called an Olympic event. So that was kind of cool to have that memory, and it just kind of really reinforced be ready for anything.
Let's talk about that just a bit. How did you find yourself becoming one of the many voices that NBC uses for the Olympics?
I've done, you kind of talked about it a little bit. I've done 30 plus sports over the years. And I think, a lot of it is understanding what's required to kind of tell stories. It doesn't necessarily be sports specific. For the most part, in every sport I call, I've got someone right next to me that is an expert in their sport. So it's making sure that they and the other members of our crew who are, documenting stories through pictures, our great camera crews, audio, our director is looking for shots, our producer is trying to integrate stories, our graphics team is allowing them to kind of all tell their stories too. So we are all working, as a cohesive unit. So for me, it's just kind of helping lead the broadcast in the right direction, documenting what's going on, identifying maybe with help of the analyst and our crew what to look for, and then just kind of seeing how it plays out.
And it's probably not said enough. That packet that the research team gives you, my gosh, that is gold, right?
Yeah, our researchers are really great, really thorough, and I like to think that I am too. So trying to take all that information, and for me is trying to put it in a way that it's easily kind of able to disseminate that and tell it and share it with folks and be able to find it when those moments matter the most. So that's kind of challenging too. But if you've got all that and you have time and the right moments kind of select or kind of appear, and you can select the spots to tell those stories. We always say without a doubt, sometimes, you're trying to tell a story and then something happens, on the mat, in the pool, on the field of play, and you're trying to react out of that to that. But it's great. I mean, I love the Olympics. It's the best sporting event on the planet. It's a thrill to be asked to do another, and I hope they keep asking me for a long time.
What's been the key for you to approach and then broadcast an Olympics? Because the amount of work that broadcasters do, it's a lot. The only thing I could think of that can come close to that is maybe during March Madness when a broadcaster is calling, 4 games in a row in one day. But even then, they have a rest day between, that first round and the second round. It's a lot of talking and a lot of broadcasting over different sports. For you, it's 2 sports, in the span of 17 days. With your experience, what has been the key for you to be able to maintain that kind of stamina and that energy?
Well, a lot of it's trying to get as much, I always say, is try to get as much prep work done before I even get to site, just because that it just alleviates a lot of the stress of those days, as you talked about. It's long hours, might be strange hours, trying to get everything involved. So as far as wrestling, I mean, I've gotten research. I was fortunate to work the trials back in April at Penn State. So I've got information on a lot of the Americans from there and starting to scour stories. And I've gone through the weight classes at the Olympics. There's 18 of them, and there's 16 athletes in each weight class. So if you do the math, that's 288 athletes, I think, that I would like to know something about, all of them. Uh, I would like to know a lot more about some of them, but I would like to know something about all of them, because the day, I don't know maybe beforehand with some of the draw who I'm going to potentially have together. And even that day when they win, if they advance and we come back as we work our way through and there's action on 3 mats and we may be bouncing from mat to mat to mat, I don't know who I'm going to have. I don't have time to go look things up. So I want to have something on everybody as we go through, and then just try to navigate those days and continue to document people's stories. It's a lot of work. I've been working on it for weeks already. I spend time every day and around everything else that I'm doing to kind of get ready for it, but hopefully it lessens some of the prep impact
Yeah.
as we get close to those actual days.
And there's a reason why they keep calling you back, so you must be doing something right.
Yeah.
Couple more for you. The science and practice of calling off of monitors, it's not something new. They've been doing that since definitely since 2008 when they really kind of spread it out for the Beijing games. But obviously, there's nothing like being there. So how do you compensate for that when you're calling off a monitor when you're in a booth?
I think it's again to be prepared as possible and just be ready for any situation. Um, I think the only thing that can be a challenge, and we have people on the ground there to help us out if something does get a little tricky if we need information and do things. But I think it's just to be in the moment and to stay in the moment. And I think we all learned in COVID when a lot of us were doing things indoors is just utilize what you have in front of you and all the skill sets. If we've got an extra camera in the venue and we can use that to be able to look behind the scenes or look for something or get information from people, we'll do that. I don't think we're kind of leaving anything on the table. And I will tell you too, a lot of times now, when I call something, I'm as much as I'm focused on the field of play, I'm focused on the monitor too, because I'm trying to tell the people that are watching what they're seeing on the screen. So a lot of times my eyes are kind of to the screen as well to make sure that I'm seeing what they're seeing, if that makes sense. Because some things I think resonate on the TV picture that don't necessarily resonate sometimes, when I'm looking at it, because you don't get the sense where you are in a stadium or where you are, if you're courtside or not courtside at a basketball game. So I think you're always trying to serve the viewer as best as you can.
Well, in person or not, I think a lot of broadcasters would kill to have the assignment that you have. A lot of young broadcasters are probably going to watch this, and they're thinking, How do I get there?" What is the biggest piece of advice you can give in trying to make that dream happen, whether it's the Olympics or the Super Bowl or whatever?
Well, I think it's a combination. I think, being on air is invaluable, but just practicing on air skills, whether you're doing it for friends, but to do it, I was talking to a young high schooler. I'm like, hey, if you're middle school, your high school let you do the public address announcements every morning. You just get practice in front of a microphone. You get practice public speaking, those type of things in classes are invaluable to be comfortable talking to other people around you. And for me too, I always think that being a good writer is helpful. It helps you generate ideas. It helps you kind of, continue to increase your vocabulary. And when I talk writing, I'm not necessarily talking writing. I'm talking writing for, almost for television, where you're talking about phrasing and talking about story ideas. I was coming out of Syracuse when I did for college, every single sporting event known to mankind, as I like to joke, wasn't being streamed somewhere like it feels like it is now. So I was a local sports guy and I learned how to kind of write stories and tell stories. And that was a great way to learn how to figure out what's important, especially when you've got a short time frame. Like again, a wrestling match, I've got a certain amount of time to be able to tell stories. Well, hey, if I've got a package and a feature I'm putting together and I've got 90 seconds, I got to figure out how to tell that most effectively in that time frame. So those skill sets I think help me and carry over to what I do now.
Yeah, you're right though. The younger generation has it way more lucky because they have all that ACC network streaming and they're getting to do live broadcast stuff that I didn't even get to do when I went to Syracuse. Last one, for those that don't know, like I was a production associate with NBC. I got to work 3 Olympics. That's actually how Jason and I met in Rio. There is nothing more fulfilling than working in Olympic Games because once you get to the end, you feel like you've done something that was worthwhile. That the American audience got to see, whether you were just like pulling cable or whether you were logging tape or whether you were calling matches. For you, what is the most fulfilling part about the Olympic experience? I mean, how great is it when you watch one of the montages that air at the final weekend and you see a highlight with your voice as the part of the soundtrack?
Yeah, it's just, it's just cool to document anything. I'd like to think that everything I do in all the sports that I do, no matter if it's a regular season game, a preseason game, or whatever it is, that it matters the same as when I'm calling an Olympic gold medal. But, you know, I think we all know the stakes are there and the reactions just feel bigger at a lot of those things. And I mean, from the athletes and the fans and the emotions. And, if you're watching NBC during some of the trials, you get a taste of that when someone breaks through and wins in an Olympic trials, just to make that after all the effort, and not just for the athlete, but for the families and friends that supported all that time and effort. And, you know, for the Americans, that's great. And a lot of them had great support along the way. But to hear some of the international stories of athletes that persevered through just crazy situations, there are going to be some refugee athletes competing in both of my sports, swimming and wrestling, and trying to tell their stories of what they've been able to overcome as they've gone through maybe some challenging pieces of their lives. It's just really fun. I mean, it just, to be able to, again, just try to document it and do it justice. For me, it's been the thrill of my work lifetime.
Well, Jason, we are looking forward to it. Jason Nappy is the voice of the prelims of swimming and also the voice for wrestling during NBC's coverage of the Olympics, which, as we've said over and over, it begins on July 26th with the opening ceremony. You can watch that right here on NBC4. Jason, congrats again on your 7th Olympic assignment. We are looking forward to hearing your voice.
David, thanks. Can't wait to have everybody come join us for quite a ride in Paris.
Appreciate it, man. Thank you.